And welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 181. Today we're going to be looking at the Fill the Frame challenge. Last week I talked a little bit about that notion of filling the frame. It's a particular topic that often crops up in photography contests. What does it mean? How do you respond to it? There was a whole bunch of different ways. So I set a challenge for this week, and we've had about 20 odd submissions, so we're going to be looking through them today. But here we are live on YouTube, if you happen to be watching live, in which case leave me a comment down below or off to the side wherever it appears on your screen. Say hello, let me know what the weather's like, tell me where in the world you are, and we'll make a start. Not that one. That one. One of these days I'll work out the technicals for all this. I can see we've got a few comments in already. Robert says, howdy all from Texas. Jack says, howdy from Florida. Partly cloudy day here. Viji says, good evening from India. April says, greetings all from a rainy Long Island, New York. I hope Florida is warm again, and Texas too. Pat says, hi everybody, fine here. Good to be back from Somerset. I'm glad to see you back here, Pat. Glad you could join us again. And we've got a Robert Schaefer, first timer here in Dallas, Texas area. So we've got two Roberts from Texas, so that's going to keep me on my toes. Viji says, yes, kept missing my alarm, so kept an alarm and logged in earlier. Susan says, hi everyone from a damp and miserable Kukubri. And Kukubri is just 9 miles down the road from here, and yes, it is damp and miserable. It's just dark today. I mean, it's not been raining heavy or anything. But it's damp and it's dark. I can't get over just how dark it is. Janet says, hello from a drizzly but mild Mississauga. It's been foggy most of the week though. Oh, fog now, that's a great one to get out into with the camera if you can. Peter says, hi from a dull and cold Annan. And Andy says, greetings from a sunny Hertfordshire. Oh, first place with sun, I think. Andy, you've got a monopoly on that one. Oh no, actually, Robert says it's cold but sunny finally here in northern Texas. John says, good day to you from a very, very wet Ohio. Nadia says, hi everyone, we're cold and windy Fife. Maggie says, so dark here in southwest Scotland. Yes, that's right. And Ingeborg says, hi from icy Oslo in Norway. Right, so there we go. We've got people, we have pictures, we have a podcast to start. So welcome everyone. So yes, so a kind of recap. So last week was this notion of filling the frame, and it's one of these things that crops up quite a lot in photo competitions. And is something where actually that notion of photo competitions is something which I'm going to start exploring a bit more. So given the fact that most of the people who come along to these podcasts tend to belong to things like Photo Crowd or Guru Shots or Camera Clubs or some of these other online ones like Viewbug, nearly all the time, there are little competitions, contests turning up which have particular titles like Filling the Frame or Still Life or Rain in Black and White or anything like that. But there are certain ones that crop up quite a lot. So what I thought I would do this year as well is kind of maybe concentrate a little bit more on this. So if you have ideas if there's particular contest titles which you feel you'd like a little bit more help with, then let me know what they are. We have a Facebook group called Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. If you haven't yet joined it, go and find that. And then or you can email me also, kim@kimayres.co.uk. But if you have ideas, you have got suggestions, you've got problems that, or difficulties or sticking points really, then let me know, and this is maybe something we can address in the future. Meanwhile, oh yes, the other thing is this year has been the introduction of Smug Points. So Smug Points there, all to do with participation. So basically, the more you participate, the more you take part, the more you contribute to these podcasts, the more Smug Points you will accumulate. Still got to figure out quite what we will do with this accumulated Smug Points, but at some point we will be able to cash them in for some kind of reward. All the winners will. Just to give you a quick heads up from the current leaderboard. So we've got Janet, is currently in the lead, 65 Smug Points, April at 50 and Andy at 45. That's what it was last week. It's all going to juggle around this week because everybody who turns up here and leaves a comment today live gets an extra 5 Smug Points, and anybody who has submitted an image today gets 10 Smug Points for that contribution. And I will also at the end of this be deciding on my top 3. So number 1 will get 30 extra Smug Points, number 2 will get 20 extra Smug Points, and number 3 will get 10 extra Smug Points. So as you can see, we're building up a kind of Smug Points leaderboard, and like I say, it's all fairly new. So again, I'm open to suggestions. If people have ideas of what they think might be quite good little prizes for maybe a monthly, quarterly, or annual leader for the leaderboard, let me know. A couple more comments here, actually. It says Meg has joined us. That's my daughter. Says hello, everyone. Nick says hi from Exeter, and Nurije says hi, everyone. Excellent. Okay, so that's where we're at. Let's make a start then. So. Robert says, well, this is my very first time. As this is my first time, I'm very, very far behind in the Smug Points. Don't worry, I'm sure you can make them up. You'll get 5 for turning up here today and another 10 for putting them in. So you're 15 Smug Points in already. Right, okay, so where are we at then? Let's make a start. So what I'm going to do then is, we've had about 20 or so submissions. Everybody sent me their images, told me a little bit about their image. So we're going to go through them. And the idea here is to kind of become inspired. Now, I will say, despite the kind of in-depth way I tried to explain what filling the frame was last week, not all the ones that have been put in actually fulfill the brief of filling the frame. So, but I've still included them because I think it's worth talking about them, about why or why not they don't, or the ones that are kind of sort of slightly loosely on the edge. So let's make a start though with April. Not that one. I will definitely get the technicals right one day. Oh, who knows? I've been doing this for 181 episodes. I still haven't managed it yet. Let's try that. Yay! Okay, so this is April's shallots. So April says, for filling the frame contest, I went to the grocery store and saw these onion shallots. I thought their colour was eye-catching and I liked their shape. So out came my camera and I took this photo. Brilliant. Yes, nice one, April. This one fulfills the brief exactly as we were talking about before. You have a nice collection of subjects and they spill out of the frame. There isn't an absolute edge. The edge of these shallots might be 1 inch outside the frame, or they might stretch on for miles. We'll never know. And good bit of opportunity, or being a bit of an opportunist rather, of being in the supermarket and going, oh right, they look like fun. Bring out your camera or your phone. I mean, you don't necessarily have to wander into supermarkets with your camera over your shoulder. But certainly if you've got your phone with you, there's usually lots of opportunities for this kind of thing. A lot of supermarkets lay out their fruit and vegetables they have. And onions, shallots, great layers of texture and what have you to play with as well. So nicely spotted there, April. Good start, I think. Gives us a nice... Oh, not that one. A good start to the day. Right, so where there seems to, I'm not sure how well I'm coming across here. It looks like there's a little bit of buffering going on, so I don't know quite how well the signal is, but hopefully it'll be fairly straightforward. John says, good one, April. Interesting subject and fills the frame. April says, thank you. Susan says, lovely textures and colours. Meg says, fantastic. Excellent. Right, okay, so next up then we have this one from Doriana. Now Doriana's already put in apologies to say that she won't be able to make it along today, but again rather similar to April's just now. We've gone for that kind of all in. Now here she's gone for cake sprinkles, says, just for filling the frame. She hasn't gone into any deeper explanation than that. Perhaps you don't need much of a deeper explanation. The only thing I would have said with this one, April, is actually I think you could maybe have cropped in slightly closer. It's all really deep and wonderful kind of in the middle part of this. As we get out to the sides, we're starting to see bits of, you know, if we look up in this top corner, we can see bits of table underneath kind of coming through, and it goes a little bit out of focus, or I don't know whether it's gone out of focus or if you put a blurred vignette on the edge of it, but either way I think it's maybe sort of dropping off a little bit. And actually if you just kind of cropped in a little bit closer, something like that, And I think immediately that really becomes that little bit more filling the frame. So sometimes with these things, your broad stroke, you've got it kind of there. But if you just a tiny little bit of extra cropping in or tidying up or shifting of your levels or whatever, you can kind of just enhance your picture just a little bit more. So with something like this, I would say just crop in a little bit further, and you'll probably find that something like this, or maybe a square version of it, would work slightly better in the online competitions than the actual crop you've got. But nice one there, Doriana. Good little image to kind of come in with. What have we got here? Viji says, love the colours. And Garry says, a square format. Oh, Gary's joined us. Hi, Garry. Glad you could make it. Says, square format might be good here. I think you're right, actually. I think a square format would probably work really well. Viji's wondering how many packets you would have to use for that, for the cake sprinkles. John says, cropping certainly helps. Right, okay, so next up then, I want to, now, Ed. Ed put, now this is an interesting one, because Ed put one into the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres Facebook group. And then he said, oh, I had difficulty with this one, about 12 to pick from, and then he put a second one in, and I said, well, do you want the first one or the second one? And he said the second one. Now, interesting. So let me show you first of all. I'm going to just go through both of them because there's a point I kind of want to make here. So this is his first one. This is Ed's first one, and beautiful autumnal scene here in southwest Scotland. First of all, though, there's a slight question of, is it? Oh, I'm getting some really weird camera things going on here. If I just 1 sec, I'm going to come back here. Have I just lost my screen? I think I've lost the camera screen here. Can somebody just leave a quick comment and say whether you can see me clearly? Okay, April said yes, and the camera image is breaking up. Okay, I'm going to attempt to unplug the camera and plug it back in and see whether that helps. So bear with me a sec. Right, okay, I don't think that's actually helped at all. Nuts. What's the best way to do this then? Okay, I'm hoping you can still hear me. Right, but that's not going to be any good if I can't. And I'm aware the picture's gone, but can you still hear me?
I can still hear you.
You can still. Yeah, okay. I've just tried unplugging the camera and back in again, and it's still not worked. Ah, right. Okay, this is going to be tricky. Okay, you can hear me. Please bear with me for a moment while I try and work out what to do. Unplugging the camera and plugging it back in hasn't worked. The next option is to close the program and reopen the program. If I do that, I will lose contact. But if you stay with me, what I will attempt to do is... Right, this will disconnect, but hopefully I will be able to reconnect on the same stream. So, might be a moment or two of nothing, but hopefully I'll come back to you. So please bear in mind for the moment, stick with me for the moment, and I apologise about this. I'm going to close this now. Okay, hopefully then I'm back again. Did that work? Oh, good. I've got a yay. Phew. Okay, right. So that seemed to work. Brilliant. Okay, lots of yays, lots of that's better. Okay, I can breathe again now. Technical. So where was I? Yes. So I was talking about the notion of Ed and Ed's wonderful forest scene. The problem is a case of, is it a fill the frame picture? And I think what we are on here is a kind of borderline. The idea with fill the frame is it's the subject that fills the frame and bursts out so that you can't see the edges. Now, strictly speaking, I suppose, yes, if the subject is the woods, then it is filling the frame. It's, but because we have a path, because we're kind of almost looking for something else, I think it's kind of borderline. Now, what that means is it comes down to who's judging it, who's looking at it, and how strict they are on it. And I think if you were to have something which is slightly borderline, it means there are going to be some people, especially in a crowd vote or even a judge vote, who are going to turn around and say, not quite filling the brief, in which case you're going to lose out on votes. So it doesn't really matter how lovely and beautiful the picture might be. If it doesn't fulfill the brief to enough of an extent, then you'll suddenly find yourself getting marked further down. And so you might be better off choosing a different subject or taking a photo like this and putting it into a different kind of competition. Now, what was interesting was he then decided he didn't want to put this one in. He wanted to put this one in instead. And actually, this is even worse. And the reason this one's even worse is because now we have a definite subject. We have a person in here. And that person becomes the focus of our attention. As soon as you see a person, the brain is hardwired for it. You will zoom in, you will notice the person. It doesn't matter the fact that the trees take up far more space. It's the person here is the first thing you see. That person has now become the subject of the photo, and the trees are now the kind of the supporting area of it. As such, the subject is not filling the frame, and therefore this moves even further away from the notion of a filling the frame picture. So that's really what I wanted to say about that. So if Ed, if you happen to be watching this one back later, understand that really your first picture is borderline. Your second picture, by having the person in it, might make it a more interesting photo in some ways because your eye zooms in on it and it gives a context and a sense of size and scale to the forest, but it's actually missing the brief of this particular contest. Okay, so where are we? Okay, I would say it's okay, people telling me I'm back. And Viji says, lovely photograph though. Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's a great, and Peter says, nice first image too. And yeah, this is it. You can have a great photo. You can have one of the greatest photos in the world, but if it's in the wrong contest, it's in the wrong competition, it's got the wrong brief, it's got the wrong title, if it's the wrong aspect ratio, if there's anything that it doesn't fit the brief. If somebody says do something cinematic and then you give them a square image or a portrait image, if somebody asks for pictures of a duck and you give them a picture of a goose, it doesn't matter how brilliant these photos are, for the contest you have to understand purpose. Does your picture fulfill the purpose? Does it reach the remit? And the better it reaches the remit, the more likely you are to score highly. Now, in a personal judged competition, like usually from a camera club or a set of experts or judges, then generally speaking, a better quality photo will also help. When you tend to be in crowd votes, you very often find that you just need to be slightly less subtle about it, a little bit more obvious. So for a thing like red, you want to have something which is red on a red background, tends to do better than red on, say, a blue background. We'll discuss some of this more as we kind of go along. Okay, so that's, but anyway, I thought that was good for Ed to send in. Next one, though, I'm going to talk of is this one by Garry. And I must admit, I rather like this. This really nice black and white one from Garry says, this is both a filled frame and macro shot. So a small plant, which from this angle, directly above, strangely reminds me of a pine forest. Black and white conversion gave the image much more impact for me, and I think you're right there, Garry. I think the black and white does give it. It's all then about the texture, and you're not distracted by the colour. It kind of multiplies up the number of different ways you could interpret it. It's got a strong kind of feel and texture to it. And very often also that notion of the macro, if you're using a macro lens, very often you really are in close. So if you've got a macro lens, it's almost an ideal lens for doing a filling the frame remitted or themed picture. So lovely one there, Garry. Really enjoyed that one. April says, nice, Garry. Susan says, lovely shades of grey. Nurije says, love that. Nice one, Garry. And black and white certainly works well. Peter says, looks like an aerial photograph. Nadia says, lovely image, Garry. Viji, loving this. Nick, like this. Ingeborg, really nice, Garry. April says, it does, Peter. Robert says, nice shot, Garry. And John says, I like the black and white. Excellent. Next up, then, we're going to go to Graham. I don't think Graham's with us today. Periodically, he's an old friend of mine from school. every now and again over the last few years he drops in and throws in a photo. But I must admit, I really do like this one that he's put in. So Graham says, I wanted to capture the joy and happiness evident in the smile of a life well lived. As you know, black and white is my favourite format and style, and I think it lends itself to this image. And I really do. I think getting a close-up of a face is not necessarily an easy one to pull off. But I think Graham's done quite astounding here. There's a real sense of you are right there. You are right close. You can, well, practically smell his breath. Whether that's a good thing or not, I don't know. But we have the real texture and the landscape of the face. But it's not a kind of a stiff-stayed portrait. He really has managed to catch this guy mid-laugh. Not an easy thing to do. So in terms of filling the frame, but also creating a real sense of emotional connection and and it's a really good black and white conversion too. And we're really aware of every, the pore of skin, every hair in the beard and the moustache. But there is that emotional side of it, that you feel that he is catching the mid-laugh. So yeah, really nice one there, Graham. Well impressed with that. Viji says, wow. Andy says that is an awesome shot. April says, nice macro face shot. Andy says, great work, Graham. Maggie says, gorgeous face creases. Peter says, nice. Nadia says, great shot. Nurije says, so much detail, great one. Susan says, great filling the frame, Graham. Inga says, quite storytelling. Pat says, a magic moment. Viji says, it's such a great image for this challenge. While people go for still images, this is quite different. John says, a great portrait shot. Wow. And I think you're right there, Viji. I mean, generally speaking, fill the frame, it's actually an awful lot of competitions. Most people tend to avoid photographing other people for them unless it's specifically a portrait challenge. To be able to get that with a person, I think, is quite exceptional. It doesn't vary. It's a lot. But if you're starting out doing these kind of things, then generally speaking, a still life of some kind, a plant or something that isn't going to move, something that isn't going to run away, something that isn't going to roll off, tends to be an easier kind of place to start, really, because you then have more control. You're not going to worry about having to get the shot very quickly. I mean, if Graham had taken that photo half a second earlier, half a second later, it would have been an entirely different image, and the guy's face would have been in an entirely different place. So yeah, not as easy to capture. April says, onion shallots don't run. Well, as long as nobody else is kind of trying to reach in, April, and grab one while you're trying to photograph, and then the whole lot kind of fall down. Meg says, oh, it makes everyone laugh when you see it. Yes, you're right. Laughing's contagious, I think. When you see somebody laughing, it automatically makes you smile. It's a bit like when you see somebody sneeze, it kind of makes your nose itch. And if you see somebody yawn, it certainly makes you yawn. Also, with quite a few people, I find if I watch somebody cough, suddenly I can automatically, want to start coughing myself. Right, okay. So next up, we Inga is sent us this one for her filling the frame. Says, I haven't been able to follow you for a while, but looking forward to meeting again. Here is my submission to filling the frame. So yes, it's good to have you back, Inga. So yeah, this one is, I would say, much more filling the frame than, say, Ed's forest, although it is we can still clearly see its branches and trees. What we don't have is like the whole tree. What we don't have is a path running through it, so this becomes almost sort of semi-abstract at this point. It's sort of silhouetted against colourful leaves, and I think the square crop works quite well as well. And all the diagonals in the branches give it a real sense of energy and movement, even though it's a still image. So yeah, in terms of filling the frame, I think it works quite well, that one. Nice use of silhouettes though as well. So yeah, thanks for sending that one in, Inga. April says, looks like a painting. Nice. Nick says, quite dramatic, this image. And Viji says, looks like veins crisscrossing, but the yellow lifts it up. Susan says, really like the black branches contrasting with the leaves. Saying thank you to everyone. Okay, next up then, I want to look at Jack. So Jack says, my way of filling a frame is to have a picture frame and fill it with friends. So, Jack, I get where you're coming from, and it put a smile on my face. However, I do have to say it isn't on brief, not for this particular contest. The whole idea with filling the frame is the idea that it spills out of a frame. Now, this one comes under it. There's another topic or theme that you will often find, which is frame within a frame. And for that, this one would be absolutely ideal. So, frame within a frame. So you've got the frame of the picture and then you've got a frame actually inside it with something else happening. Absolutely perfect for this. But in terms of fill the frame, as in what we've been talking about, which is the subject then spills out of the picture to the point whereby you can't see the outline of it, I'm afraid you missed on that one. So nice try, and I get where you're coming from, and it did put a smile on my face, but I'm afraid that if you actually put this into a full-on contest called Fill the Frame, I can't imagine it would score particularly highly. But thanks for putting the smile on my face anyway. Viji's laughing. He says it's very much a photo booth kind of shot. April says creative. Peter says it's cheerful. And Susan says nice one, Jack. Okay, next up then, I'm going to go to Janet. And I really like this one of Janet's. I think in terms of, if you like, fill the frame, this is doing exactly what we're asking of, and it's really colourful as well. She said, I did have a couple of ideas to try this week, but the weather and time were not cooperating, so I found an old shirt from Calgary, Alberta in 2018. These were a pile of plastic chairs somewhere downtown, but I liked the bright colours. I did crop my original edit a little bit tighter for the challenge. And so I think this is a really good example of the fill the frame idea. So if we stop and we think about it for a moment, yeah, we can probably work out that it's probably is plastic chairs or something very similar. Nice and colourful, but it's this idea of, without the actual outline, without seeing the stack, you're not maybe totally sure what it is. It does move into it has a kind of abstract quality to it, and it's certainly spilling over. There is no outline that you can see, so the subject is completely immersed, so in that sense it absolutely does the job, and it's bright and colourful. And I can imagine that if you were doing one of these kind of online topics of the contests, this would probably do quite well. The only exception to that is, generally speaking, in online contests, what we've tended to find in the past is when you're on these especially the kind of crowd vote sites where people are kind of scrolling at high speed, quite often square and landscape crops tend to work better than portrait crops. So if you were to maybe chop the top and the bottom off, make this kind of squarer, I think that would then lift it a little bit for those kind of competitions. But yeah, nice and brightly colourful. I think that one really does the job. So thanks for sending that one in. What have we got here? Oh, Nadia says lovely and colourful. April says pretty colours, but I would love it in landscape format. Beating me there to it. Inga says cool. Peter says very creative and colourful. Susan says well spotted. Janet. Nick says these are chair frames filling the frame. John says I like the chairs. Good shot, Janet. April says Kim's favourite photos are in black and white, and mine are landscape. Our landscape format style photos. Yeah, so far, I mean, I've really enjoyed the black and white, but I also like the colour ones too. It really kind of depends on the. It's this thing of how well does it fulfil the brief. First of all, you've got to fulfil the brief. Right? If you don't fulfil the brief, it's a picture going into a competition is never going to score up in the higher end. Secondly, you've then got to try and get. Technically, you've got to get, so is it in focus? If you can get some kind of leading lines or interesting or emotional connection or something like that, that's likely to lift it. Once you've done all the technical, you've done all your composition, you've got your lighting right, and it fulfills the brief, then at that point you're kind of down to the taste of the judge. And if you don't know your judge, then it feels a bit random. If you do know your judge, then sometimes you can adjust which picture you put in order to try and appeal to the judge that you've got. Okay. Oh, Janet says thanks. Right. So next up then we're going to John. And John sent in this one. It says, here's a shot I took in on the East Coast, Virginia, in a museum. Sorry, I could not find the originals. I think they're on an older computer that died. Yeah, that's always a problem. If I've had this problem where you failed to back up everything before the computer went. You do that once, you don't tend to do it a second time. They've done fairly well in competition. I think they satisfy the requirement. And yes, they do. And I think this is a little bit like the beans, the tomato soup one that I was showing last week, only we've got a wider range of pictures, all these different kinds of oysters, I think is probably better. What I would say, if you wanted to tidy this up a little bit, if I just open this in Photoshop, I think there's what we've got here is the edging is really what I'm thinking about. Is it for this one? I mean, first of all, it curves down a little bit. So if I'm going to Control T, actually, I'll tell you what. Let me duplicate the layer and then Control T, so I transform. I'm just going to pull the bottom out a little bit so that it looks like it's flat on, rather than because at the moment you've taken it sort of was looking fine at the top, and then it dropped away as it went down lower. So to just do that, but then what I would do is I would just crop the edges in. Don't be right up against the edge of the can. In order for it to really feel like it's spilling out of the photo, if you sort of brought that into there on this side, just a little bit on the inside here, and again a little bit down here, so you're not actually getting the edges lining up with the tins. You want the edges to be cutting through the tins, and actually when you come to something like that, I think that really tends to feel more like it's filling the frame. You are filling to the point whereby the picture is spilling out of beyond the frame of the picture itself. And it's just a very subtle little thing, just a little bit of cropping, straightening, and I think you would suddenly find, if this does well, if your previous one did well, you might find just doing this to it will up it a little bit more as well. So I thought that was worth mentioning. But yeah, nicely spotted there. Fun seeing all these different kind of cans of oysters. So thanks for sending that one in. Well, okay, a couple more comments here. April says, I like this seafood canned food. Susan says, I didn't know there were so many different kinds of canned oysters. I can't. Oysters have no appeal to me personally, but yeah, clearly canned. Whole world of canned oysters I knew nothing about. April says, I'm guessing that's because of different time periods, because it's from a museum. Oh, John says, good point, thanks. Inga says, worked very well with small adjustments. Gary said, would be interesting to see this at a 45-degree angle. Okay, actually, let's just flip back a sec and just actually see what that looks like. So if I was to just take this and crop, and we go something like that. Yeah, that's kind of interesting too. Does it work better? I think it tends to make you kind of tilt your head a little bit sideways to sort of see what's there. But it does have its merits. It does have its merits. Certainly worth playing with. And I think that's a really good point. And nicely, it's well raised there, Gary, is the idea that it's always worth playing around with your angles and your crops, because sometimes suddenly just doing a 45-degree shift or flipping something in reverse, or even sometimes upside down, can transform an image and suddenly make it more punchy in the way that it wouldn't normally. And certainly actually that 45 degrees I think does make you pause for a moment to think about what you're looking at, which in terms of online contests, when people are scrolling quickly, if you get people to pause for a fraction of a second more, you're more likely to get that extra like or vote. Oh, and Viji says beautiful crop works very well here, so I think you'd have got the extra vote from Viji. So thanks for that suggestion, Garry. Nicely done. Right, okay, next up then, I want to go to this one from Lisa. Now, Lisa just said fitting the whole lot into the frame, and this is one of those where it isn't quite. I can understand, it seems like you're filling the frame because the cows spill off either side, but it's only a kind of side to side. We're still very aware of we've got the ground below and the barn behind and what have you, and actually to really fill the frame you'd need to be something more like this, I think. Now if you've got that where you've got the cow, because in the end it's the cows that are the subject. To come back to that notion of filling the frame, it's the subject that needs to be filling the frame. And if the subject isn't filling the frame, if you've got other things around the subject that are clearly there, maybe enhancing the subject, but they are still not the subject, then you're no longer fulfilling the requirements of the fill the frame. So, appreciate where you're coming from with that one, Lisa, but if you're talking strictly speaking about the idea of does it fulfill the brief, then I'm afraid it doesn't. But thanks for sending that one in. What have we got? Viji says, oh, if the herd if zoomed in would be good. April says, this photo is great to be hung in a Cracker Barrel or a steakhouse. Robert says, or a steakhouse, yes. Yeah, that's it. I mean, any picture could, find the right context for it. In this case, what we're talking about is the context of the fill the frame. Right, okay, next up then we have Marie, sorry. And Marie, not that one, so that one, here we go. Marie says, a beautiful dahlia flower, the little leaves curling in the centre caught my attention. And of course I tried to capture that. I'm from South Africa. I want to be nice and warm in South Africa, at the height of summer, practically. Or are you just hinting of autumn yet? No, in January, I suppose, July, it must be still height of summer, I think. So, nice bright picture of a dahlia. Now, two things that occur to me here, Marie, is one is, again, we've got a bit of, we've just starting to get the outside here. We've got a little bit on the outside. I think it looks like you're photographing this through a window or through a piece of glass of some kind, because there's reflection. In fact, I can see fingernail, definite fingernail here, finger reflection. So that's being caught. So I don't know whether you're quite what it is you're looking through, but that layer of glass between you and the dahlia is blocking some of the detail, is distracting slightly, isn't allowing the fullness of the richness of the colours to come through. And the other bit is we've still got edges. Whatever the frame is on the top right corner, bottom right corner, and there's a little bit of the leaf clicking out here. So once again, that notion of zoom in a little bit further, something more like this. And I think then you have more of that sense of filling the frame. So what we're trying to do is, for the most part, is remove any sense of outside lines to the image, and that's what will really make the difference. You can occasionally get away with a little bit of outside line, maybe just like a little bit here and there, or like the edge of Graham's, the head that Graham did with the face, but the less of that you have, the better. And if it's a case of just cropping a little bit closer makes the difference, then again, in terms of scoring well in the competitions, you'll do better with that. So I hope that all makes sense, Marie, and thanks for sending that one in. So Viji says, trying to pinch and zoom. Inga says, I would love to have that cropped quite a lot. And Viji says it curls in quite a beautiful way. So it's a lovely flower. It's just needing to get that crop. Right, okay, next up then is Marilyn. So Marilyn sent in this one, another dahlia, but completely different. A beautiful dahlia flower. The little leaves curling in the centre caught my attention. Oh no, sorry, wrong one. Sorry. Marilyn says, I'm reading Marie's one again. Marilyn says, attached is my entry for fill the frame, just a summer dahlia. This seems to be a common challenge subject in guru shots, but I never do well in those, so any feedback would be appreciated. Okay, so This one does fill the remit, fill the frame. You've got the flower. We don't see the edges of the flower. So in that sense, it does what you need it to. So what you're asking for specifically is the fact you're saying that it doesn't quite do as well as you would hope or expect to in something like Guru Shots. Guru Shots, like PhotoCrowd or ViewBug, is primarily a crowd voting online site. Now they do have expert votes, they do have a guru vote, but the majority of stuff tends to come from the crowd vote. So if you're wanting something like this to work better, then what I would suggest, I will just do, there's a couple of very quick things you can do with this. I'll just close that one from John. And primarily what we're really talking about is making it stand out a little bit more. So we're kind of wanting to maybe boost the colours a little bit and boost the contrast a little bit. So if I just duplicate that layer, what I will do is then, let's just quickly open this in Camera Raw, because that gives me little bits of flexibility I can. So if I then go to Light, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the contrast and boost the contrast a little bit. That makes the darks darker, the lights a little bit lighter, but it also gives it a little bit of punch. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the colour. Now, this is very orange, but I notice, or sort of, in the kind of yellow band, but there's little bits of there's hints of blue and purple in the outer part of the leaves here. And I would say you could potentially make a little bit more of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift the temperature colour into the blue a bit, so we get a little bit more of that. Now, we've lost some of the yellows, so I'm going to take the vibrance. Now, as opposed to saturation, which just boosts every colour, the vibrance tends to boost the yellows and the blues a little bit more subtly. So you can kind of drag that up a little bit. And now what we're doing is we're creating more of a contrast, and we're getting these kind of purpley blues coming, and we're getting the sort of orangey yellows as well. And then maybe if we went to, not curves, we went to effects, and maybe just a little touch on the clarity. Just to kind of, maybe the clarity, or maybe we go back and do a touch more in the contrast. Now, at this point, we've made it far stronger. Now, again, on a subtle level, if you were doing this for Camera Club, and this was printed, probably the first thing anybody would say when they looked at it would be, oh, that looks a little bit oversaturated. However, if you're talking about an on-screen thing like Guru Shots, where people are looking at it on their phone, on their tablet, and they're scrolling at fairly high speed, then just from that to that is going to make it punch. So really what we're talking about here is a little bit of extra colour or vibrance, maybe a fraction of a blue shifter so that you get more of the blues and purple, so we're getting that nice kind of colour swap, and boosting the contrast a bit, so you're getting slightly darker darks and a richer colour scheme. And I think something like that you'll probably find will score slightly better. So hope that one makes sense to you there, Marilyn. Yeah, interesting one. Thanks for sending that on. And it is interesting how you can have images which do fit the brief, but for some reason doesn't fit in. And primarily you need to understand what else you're up against. And as we've talked before about these online sites, is people are scrolling at high speed, so subtlety tends to get lost. If you want to score well in these kind of online competitions, crowd voting ones, slightly brighter, slightly less subtle, slightly more contrast, tends to give you an extra 5%, 10%, 20%, depending on how it goes. I mean, obviously it helps if you've got a reasonable photo in the first place. Doing all these things isn't going to win you a competition if your photo doesn't fit the brief, but that might help. Okay, so what have we got here? Susan says, wow, Marilyn, just gorgeous. Peter says, nice. Viji says the edges are crisp. April says, has a painterly look. Nice. Nadia says, absolutely beautiful. Love the colour. Andy says, lovely macro. Nick says, like the soft peach colours here. Garry says, could the introduction of an increased Gaussian blur at the edges might help give it a thorough quality? Possibly. There's a certain matter of taste there. I'm personally slightly less of a fan of the blurring at the edges. Occasionally it works. It works if there's something very definite at the centre that you're trying to draw the attention to. it could work. I think there's a thing here where maybe you play with it a little bit, but there's going to be a certain matter of personal taste on it. John says, nice photo of the flower, and I agree the photo needs to pop on screen. Andy says, try some shallow depth of field using Photoshop neural blur filter. Yeah, and I suppose in a way that's going to do the same thing that Gary's suggesting, is so that what you do is the sharpness draws your eye. So you select the sharp area, so you make sure that the eye is getting definitely drawn to the centre. Having said that, I do quite like some of the patterns on the outside. Peter says, suitable adjustments, and Robert also says, seems a little blown out on the edges. Yeah, it's getting fainter or whiter as you're moving to the edge. Now you can kind of darken that down, creating a darker vignette, or you can go to the blur. So yeah, there's various different adjustments you can do. We've got somebody else here, Oz Sens, not entirely sure how you pronounce that, says, in adjustments, less is more. It depends entirely on the image you're starting with, but I do know where you're coming from. But welcome to the podcast, Oz. Right, okay. So next up, then we are going to go to Meg. One second. Oh, where are we gone? I've suddenly lost the photos here. So Meg sent in this one and said, hi Dad, on Monday I took several different photos. Then I took a photo of the log basket next to the TV and the fireplace because I really like the different textures of the log basket itself. And yes, I have to say, I mean, I'm slightly biased here because she's also my daughter. But not just that, I do think it's it's a really good kind of fill the frame, abstract textured kind of shot. Only problem that you're up against here, Meg, and I know it's because first of all you're using your phone, which doesn't have the highest quality of thing, but also because it's fairly low light, it's very, very noisy. There's a lot of noise. There's not a lot of detail. As we move in, the noise kind of stands out quite a lot. But it's a really lovely texture. Might also work well in black and white. In fact, actually, let's just do a quick. I didn't try this one in black and white, but if I just do a very quick gradient map and maybe put that on classic or something like that. Yeah, I think that's quite interesting too. Where you remove the colour, it's then all about the texture, a little bit like Gary's plants earlier. But having said that, there's something quite nice. I quite like the kind of the soft beiginess and the kind of bluiness that you get. Didn't mean to quite do that. The kind of soft blue greens that you get in other parts of the willow basket too. So yeah, there's room to play with there, but again, yeah, it's kind of nice as sort of becomes abstract at this point. We know it's willow woven of some kind, but we don't necessarily know what it is we're looking at, and it does fill the frame. So nice one there, Meg. Thank you for sending that one in. Where are we? April says, great idea. Meg, well, Peter says, nice one, Meg. Viji says, incredible texture and capture. Susan says, great abstract, Meg. John says, good eye, Meg. Nadia says, love the texture in this one, Meg, lovely. Ingo says, I really like this with textures and lines. Viji says, time to gift her a DSLR, Kim. We have actually been talking a little bit about that, Viji, about getting Meg a better camera, but it's still working on the best way to go. What to do with that one. Gary says, that's a compelling shot. How often do we miss what we see every day? A really good point there, Gary. I think sometimes it is in just that absolute everydayness of something. And one of the beautiful things about photography, why we're often all drawn to photography, is the notion that it allows us to see the world in a different way to the way that we normally see it with our own eyes. These frozen moments, these detailed moments, these captures are quite different. You know, and a good photo kind of draws us in because we are looking at something in a subtly different way than we normally would. Susan says, sorry, I prefer the colour image. No need to apologise. Viji says the knots are intrinsic, and Meg says, thank you, everyone. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Meg. Next up, then, we are going to go to Nadia. Where we go? Here we go. Yes. So Nadia says, this is from my archive when I was experimenting with my new macro lens, trying to get the centre of the flower in focus. This was taken handheld. Now I took a look at the EXIF information that you sent in, and I use 40th of a second. So I'm incredibly impressed if you're doing handheld to get a 40th of a second that you managed to get it in focus. 40th of a second is just, especially with a macro lens, for me, my own hand wobble would mean it would be out of focus. But there's some beautiful textures in this. You've gone for a black and white, a nice kind of soft black and white conversion. Subtle little textures in the petals and in the centre part as well. It's a very soft, very beautiful photo. This we've got, although we do have bits of the edge of the flower up here, I think it still fulfills the fill the frame remit with this. Zoomed in a touch more, maybe. I think there is a little bit of a problem actually, that if you kind of come to here, then the centre part can then become the subject in itself, in which case you then end up having to go right in closer and you're into an entirely different kind of photo. But I think this one works. Very soft, so nicely done. Thank you, Nadia, for sending that one. April says very pretty, Nadia. Susan says loving the softness in the foreground. Inga says beautiful. Peter says nice macro. Right, just a little reminder here that if you happen to be finding these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, and you would like to support them in some way, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do it. Always helps. Another way, of course, invite your friends. And if you invite your friends along and they become contributors as well, you get yourself some extra Smug Points as well. Right, okay, so let's move on then. So next up then, we're going to go for Nick. And Nick sent in this nice colourful one, says, having just watched your Filling the Frame video, I hope I'm eligible to make an entry for this week's competition. This is a shot I took last year in a nearby cemetery, which is a haven for all types of wildlife, and rhododendrons were at their best. Rhododendrons, really kind of wonderful colour, really grab you. Now, there's an interesting thing here, which is you've created a frame within a frame. Now, Susan will know where I'm going with this one because I've talked to her about this before now. That what you've done is you've created a little white border, and in fact, beyond that, I think there's a little grey line as well. So you've got a grey border, then a white border, and then the picture. And here's a little suggestion or a little point which I think is worth remembering. Having it's almost like mounting it is generally speaking, when you are doing something like for a camera club, you're printing something out, having a mount helps to define the space for where the photo is. When you're online though, we're at a lower resolution. We've got a much more limited number of pixels to play with in the screen. Less real estate, as some of our friends say in America. And essentially, when you then create a border around it, you are losing real estate, you are losing space, you are having even less pixels to play with. So instead of having, say, 1500 pixels, you use 50 odd or 25, even if you're using 25 and you're reducing it that much. Why do that? I think the screen is already, whether it's somebody using a phone or they are using a tablet or they're using a computer screen, has already essentially got a border around it. It's already got a frame around it. And I think as soon as you start sticking a margin in, what you're doing is you've got less space. What you want to do, what we're always trying to do, is you're trying to make your picture almost as large as possible as you can on whatever screen there is, because that's where it's going to stand out. And you've there's a word, and I can't think of the word, but it's not inhibited, in something. Word completely gone. But you've restricted yourself. You've lessened the amount of pixels. Later on, if I listen back to this, I will know exactly the word that I'm going for, but I'm sure you know what I mean. That aside, yeah, really nice, colourful photo. Spills out, fills the brief, and again, in a kind of online thing where people are scrolling, nice bright vivid colour like pink is going to kind of grab the attention, more likely to get a few votes with that one. So thanks for sending that one, Nick. Where are we? Nadia says thank you everyone. Okay, April says nice colour. Nadia says beautiful. Peter says very beautiful. April says I don't even know I can do that border, so untechnical. Actually, it's relatively straightforward to create a border. That doesn't matter. I don't need to go through it because I'm actually telling you not to make a border. Okay, Nick says, that's one of my habits, mostly for printing. I'll try and remember to forego the frame next time. Yeah. Susan says, yes, I'm very guilty of putting frames around my images, usually because my camera club prefers them that way. Yes, I've seen them. Yes, I think we've talked about this one before, Susan. Yes, camera clubs quite often it's a nice way of getting like a little kind of fringe. But yes, in terms of online space, you're restricting the number of pixels you're giving yourself by doing it. Okay, next up then we are going to go to Nicola. So now here's a really bright colourful one. Nicola says, taken a rose in our garden last year after a shower of rain. I swear I could always smell this as I looked at it in Photoshop. I like the way the arrangement of the petals gently guide you around the photo in an arc shape. Thank you for doing another and enjoyable, informative podcast. Well, no, thank you for the feedback. So yes, this one, Nicola, and raindrops, as we talked about before. And if you don't have raindrops, Susan says she's got her trusty water spray. Go out. We've done that. We've played around with these ideas before. They really kind of add a whole pile of extra texture and light to petals, especially. There's an interesting thought, though, as well, which is that notion of worth playing around with the rotation. I'm not necessarily going to say one is better than another, but I was looking at this earlier, that if you kind of turn this 90 degrees, it has a different feel to it. It has a slight, there's a, it does change the mood slightly. And if we turn it 90 degrees again and have it up the way, it kind of changes it again. And do it the other way and it changes it again. So depending on the what you're really wanting to put across, actually rotating the image can make quite a difference. I think why I was struck by this is actually because what's happening is generally, I mean, most of the time when we see a flower, if we're either looking at it from sort of straight into the middle of the flower, or we're looking at it from the side, in which case it tends to, that arc becomes like a bowl and it curves up the way. This one curves down the way, more like kind of bell shaped than kind of what we tend to think of as flower. And so immediately as soon as I saw it, I kind of wondered what it would be like if you rotated it. But of course, if you rotate it completely like that, then the light doesn't necessarily come there. Then it looks like it's lit from underneath as well. So but sideways also kind of interesting. Fun flower, fills the brief, does everything you need it to. Just really throwing that idea out as a suggestion there, which we mentioned earlier about the idea that it's sometimes worth rotating, playing with images to see whether they might work better slightly on one side or even inverted. Where are we? Oh, April says, love the water drops. John says, the rose jumps out for me. Nurije says, love the raindrops, nicely done. Pat says, lovely rose. Peter says, very nice, sharp and colourful. Nick says, this is lovely, great richness in colour. Viji says, the coming musk rose full of dewy wine. And Meg says, Meg says, thank you very much to Susan for the Strictly Come Dancing programme that you gave me. Yes. Yes, Susan went off to a Strictly Come Dancing show. Meg is like a major fan of Strictly Come Dancing, and Susan very kindly came round and gave Susan gave Meg her brochure for it. So yes, thank you again to Susan for that. Right, okay, so coming back from domestic family affairs, let's flip over to Nurije. And Nurije said this one for filling the frame. She said, my kids gave me the idea while they were eating them. And they weren't happy when I kept them for a couple of days so I could take this shot. Yes, I can imagine. Mummy swiped all her sweeties so she could photograph them. Yes, you can tell when you're living with a photographer. So yes, nice bit of fun here. It's interesting that you've got... Does this mean like nobody likes the strawberry ones? Is that why you've got so many of those ones left? I think there's chances to play here with different arrangements of colour. The fact that most of them are pink, and then you've got a blue one, which is the front. I mean, it's interesting with the layout here that this one is the one that's kind of at the front, grabbing the attention. It's got the most sharpness. This one though also has a corner of sharpness, and it being a slightly different colour grabs the attention. But then this one, same colour as that, but out of focus. And then out of focus orange and yellow at the back. And I think there's something here whereby playing around with the arrangements of colours of how you might do it could be an interesting thing in itself. Now, in a couple of weeks' time, a quick heads up, I'll talk again about it towards the end of the podcast. I'm going to be talking about the notion of still life. And in some ways, this is bordering over and overlapping rather with the notion of still life, because you're getting the chance to organise objects into a particular shape. And to start thinking, though, about how their relationship to each other and how the eye moves in and around it, as well as whether it's just going beyond the frame. But yes, I feel for your children. There, Mummy swiped all the sweeties to photograph. Thanks for sending that one in. Where are we? April says, I like this shot. Nurije says, bad mother. Robert says, that is suffering for one's art. Yes, it's fine. You suffer for your own art, but when your mum makes you suffer for her art, that's a different one. Nadia says, this made me smile when I saw it on Facebook. Nurije says, actually, they are their favourites. That's why I had so many. Oh, what, the strawberry ones, right? The red. Susan says, I like this, but how about the one blue one amongst many strawberry ones? And Viji says, yeah, yum. Yes, I think that's the kind of the playing around with it. That maybe you had a broad set of one colour and then you have one of another. That's going to make that one leap out and grab all the attention. Oh, and Pat's talking strictly to Meg. Right, so next up then, let's go to Peter. Peter says, this is a photo of a dahlia. Obviously, dahlias are the in flower for this kind of thing. Taken in the garden. It was at an awkward angle, resting on my knees, so tripod used. Waited for the wind to die down to catch the photo. Yes, waiting for the wind to die. The number of times I've been out in the garden to try and take a photo, and these little breeze bits, constantly just out of focus, just missing the bit that I want. So bright, colourful, really that. My only thought with this, Peter, is the idea that I think the white seemed very bright, and I wonder whether toned down a fraction, pulled back a fraction might work. I don't know how much detail is actually lost. I mean, it might, I think it's maybe one of these that also varies from screen to screen. But certainly for me, if I take this and I just grab the curves and I just bring the middle down a little bit, something like that, suddenly I get more detail coming out of, which feels like it had been lost in the bright parts of the inner parts of the leaves. That feels sort of slightly too bright for me. That feels, although playing with the curves has made the colours maybe just a bit too oversaturated, so you maybe need to go in and play with that a little bit as well. But primarily the bit that I'm thinking about is there are some lovely textures on the inside of these petals, but I think that they're getting slightly lost and blown out there, but you can kind of bring them back in a little bit. Well, I think a little, I like it. It does fulfill the remit, but a little bit of playing with it, I think, could just enhance it that little bit extra. But thanks for sending that one in, Pete. April says, pretty, dahlias are gorgeous flowers. Meg says, beautiful flower. Viji says, more pink. Yes, beautiful spotting and capturing. Okay, next up then, we're going to go to Robert Schaefer from Texas. And Robert sent us in this one. It looks like the eye of a flamingo. Meg quite likes flamingos too, I think. Says, I just joined the site a little while ago. Thank you to Robert Baltimore Gullick. So that's our normal Robert from Texas, Robert from Texas number 1. Not sure if I'm doing this right, so I hope this is okay for you filling the frame contest. Thank you. Yes, well, first of all, delighted you can make it along. Secondly, this does confirm the fact that our other Robert invited you along and you've taken part. So first Robert would get a bonus 30 Smug Points for bringing somebody along. As I said earlier, with the Smug Point system, it's all about contribution, whether it's contributing for the challenges, contributing for the feedback session, turning up and chatting, contributing directly in the chat to these podcasts, or inviting your friends along as well. Brilliant shot of, and it really does, it fills the frame. It becomes really quite abstract, almost. We know it's an eye, we know it's joy, but I do like the fact that you've got the white coming up from the lower right, sort of scooping round, and it's all about line and shape, and then the texture of the feathers. And just very slightly off centre as well. But yeah, the eye gets drawn to the eye, but it's nicely filling the frame. So yeah, good entry there, Robert, and I'm glad you decided to join in and join us with that. April says, good macro. Robert says, great eye, Robert. Peter says, nice. Viji says, eyes. Susan says, love the diagonals here, Robert. Meg says, I am absolutely loving flamingos. Nick says, this is certainly dramatic. Great contrast, and the eye being central is nice. Inga says, interesting with the white triangle. Yeah, and I think it's that white triangle which really kind of adds to it. All right, next up then is our other Robert from Texas. Who says, I was at Dallas Camera Club field trip this morning at an amateur rugby match. I had this idea of capturing a rugby player full face of mud for your Fill the Frame challenge. Fortunately, this lad was more than happy to ham it up for the camera. He did a lot of poses and even yelled freedom in honour of the Scottish legend from William Wallace of Braveheart. Oh, Mel Gibson's got a lot to answer for. Looking forward to the podcast, and I even evangelised your show to some of the DCC, Dallas Camera Club members. Hopefully they will start participating soon. Well, you were right, and Robert Schaefer has joined us, so as I say, extra 30 smug points to you there, Robert, for that. So yeah, nice bit of fun, face full of mud, and a kind of fun kind of expression on the face of the young lad. Interestingly, though, I would say you've kind of, although it is filling the frame, I will give you that, because we don't see his chain. He is filling it. Because of the way you kind of got his hair coming down here, it's almost frame within a frame. His face is framed, but by the hair. But still, the fact that we don't see the outside of his head, I think we'll happily give you that one. But yeah, it's always good when you can actually get somebody who's prepared to cooperate with you for that. So nice fun shot there, Robert. Thank you for sending that one in. Where are we go? April says, funny shot. Susan says, lovely dirty face, Robert. Ingo says, possible to crop in slightly. Yeah, and I think that's again that kind of thing whereby it is, because it's being framed by the hair, that maybe slightly closer crop might work slightly better. Worth playing around with. Robert says, I was hoping to get more smug points for the Scottish reference. Yeah, tricky one that. Enjoy the extra smug points for getting your friend Robert along. John says, another good portrait that fills the frame. And Nadia says, great shot. Right, okay, next on then we will go to Susan. And Susan said this is an interesting one. This image is from my files and is entitled Not a Spider's Web. It was made by stretching hot glue gun threads across a jam jar which had a small amount of milk in the bottom. I then placed the jar on a rotating coloured light and sprayed the threads with water. Using my trusty water spray came in handy here. I've made minor alterations in Photoshop elements, and it was taken with my 60mm macro lens. And I love this, Susan. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's and thank you for telling us how you went about it and the description of it. It's there's a lot of work gone into this to try and make it right. This kind of macro droplets on threads. But then that idea of actually having it in over a jam jar, but you've got so you've cropped in, or you've shot within the confines of the top of the jam jar. You've got milk in the bottom, but you've got coloured lights underneath the milk, so that's creating a very soft light underneath. But also, because you've got a shallow depth of focus, because you're using a macro lens, we can't see the underneath. All it's doing is giving it this really soft, colourful kind of background. And then what would happen is with each of the droplets is also creating a reflection of those coloured bits of background or bottom of the jar as well. So it's really textural, beautifully conceived, very nicely put together, very nicely technically put together. And because all the lines go out the edge, we can't see the top of the jam jar. It fills that brief of filling the frame. So very nicely done there, Susan. Thanks very much for sending that one in and for telling us how you did it as well. April said, oh, a lot of effort. Susan. Viji says, this is lovely. Robert says, this is nice. April says, very unique. Nadia says, great shot. Robert Schaefer says, very abstract. Nice. Peter says, very cool. Viji says, Susan, I'm loving this. Great technique. John says, wow, great shot and brilliant idea. Meg says, absolutely beautiful. Nadia says, lovely. Inga says, really intriguing. And Viji says, crystal clear photograph. Wish I could take such a photo. Susan says, thanks for the comments, everyone. Cool, excellent. Okay, right, on to the final photo, and then I will hand out my first, second and third Smug Point awards and tell you what's coming up next week. So do stick around. So the final picture then, and for the for the more observant among you, you might have noticed I've just been doing this one in alphabetical order. So we finish with Viji. And Viji says, for my submission fulfilling the frame challenge today, today being a couple of days ago when she sent this, we are celebrating our 75th Republic Day in India. So I used the theme for this photos challenge and tried to recreate our national flag as far as I could, minus the wheel, Ashoka Chakra. No, sorry, hold on a sec. And so, just for anybody, she's sent another image in just to show you this is what the Indian flag actually looks like. So back to here, so we've got the orange, the white and the green. She said, I used dried baby oranges for saffron colour, though it turns out to be slightly on the red side, country cabbage that looks slightly on the pale green side, and coriander leaves for green. So I think again, this is a lot of fun. I think the idea that you would sort of play around with getting different fruit and vegetables and what have you in order to represent the flag of your country, I think is a lot of fun. What I would say with this in terms of making subtle adjustments is the first thing, if you've got access to Photoshop or anything like that, if we went to hue saturation, and what we do is we select the reds, and then you can move these. Now, if I move this to the left, it creates them to purples and blues. If I move it to the right, it goes to oranges and greens. But what it does mean, if I just nudge this a little bit, you see we can take it into the orange and maybe just make it look slightly more orange to match up with the colours that you're doing. The other thing I would say to you here, Viji, is you've given it a kind of a square crop. I think what would really have worked really well with this, if you're doing this, is to have laid it out to give it the same kind of proportions as the flag. So your actual flag is going to be more kind of that shape. Now, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll do a content aware fill on this, and with a bit of luck, oh no, okay, hold on, do that, and then try that again. I was on the wrong line. Let's go back to here and do that and that, and then do a content aware fill. And if I'm really lucky, then what it might do, yes, there you go, it's expanded it out. Now, it hasn't expanded out perfectly, it's not quite done it there, but it's really about that idea of just trying to make it slightly more flag shaped, I think. If you're going, what I love here, Viji, is that is what you've gone ahead to do, but I think just a little bit of extra thought, a little bit of, let's make it match the size of the flag. And maybe if you did want to have the wheel in the middle, something like a cut up, a cross slice of an orange or a lime or a citrus fruit, I could imagine work quite well, or even a kiwi fruit or something, but something which will give you that like little segmented aspect of the wheel could then be placed in there as well. So you've gone to a lot of effort to make it happen, but I think it's the little extra details which would then really lift it to the next level. But really fun idea. Thank you for sending that one in, Viji. Well, thank you then to everyone who sent in the images. Okay, just give it a few more comments here. Where are we? Nick says, that's a new one to me, very imaginative and colourful, well done. Susan says, great idea, Viji, and well done. April says, creative shot. Peter says, well thought out, Viji. Nadia says, great idea, Viji. Viji says, oh, nice idea, I do have Photoshop. I ran shot of oranges, hence the odd shape. Felt rectangular is a good shape for a flag. Inga says, nice composition. a good idea with the landscape ratio, content fill, but I was a bit off. Yeah, I think it's then a case of just adjusting, maybe make your cabbage line a bit thinner and your green line a bit thinner, and just pull them down so that they match up if you've not got enough of the oranges on the top. John says, interesting idea. Nick says, well thought out and imaginative. Viji says, true, Kim, I should have tried that for the chakra. And thank you, everyone. Okay, so yes, thank you then to Viji, and thank you to everyone who's taken the time to send in images. So hopefully then, as well as actually having fun seeing how everybody else has done this, is perhaps inspired you for some of your own ideas. Next time you're on PhotoCrowd or Guru Shots or Viewbug, or your camera club has a filling the frame contest, this is going to give you a better idea of how you can respond. And it certainly, hopefully at the end of this, you've all got a slightly better idea of what works, what doesn't, and what could maybe be improved. In terms of my top 3 here, I think I'm going to go for my top one. I think is going to be the one of Graham. I think for me this is the standout image. So Graham's going to get an extra 30 smug points for this one. My second place is going to go to Garry. I think this is beautifully done. I love the black and white conversion, the textures. It grabs me in a way. Again, I think whether it's square or landscape or anything, but the way I'm looking at this, because I'm not looking at this in a kind of a fast thing, I'm actually taking the time to look at it. This one, you're going to get the extra 20 points. And my third place here is going to go to where are we? Susan. Yes. I think, again, that we have a full combination of it fits the brief, but it's also technically very well done. It's colourful, it's eye-catching, and also appreciate you telling us how you did it as well. I'm also going to do a wee commendation for Viji with this, so I'll give you an extra 5 points to Viji. Although there's plenty more could have been done with the technical and getting it right, I just love the idea of it. I love the fact that you went to the effort to try and make a flag out of all these different things. So I'll give you an extra 5 on that one. So there we go. Thank you to everybody for sending in the images. There'll be some really lovely ones and some inspirational ideas. So next week then, let's come down. Yeah, well, first of all, I would say that, as you see, I'm dishing out the smug points. We're now at the end of January, so once I add the smug points into here, we will have a winner for January as such, except for the fact that I haven't fully decided what to give out as smug points. So I am open to suggestions here. If you happen to be on the Facebook group, go to the Facebook group, leave me a suggestion of what you think might be good smug points rewards. For example, I mean, some of you know that I make up postcards of some of my images. I could send out a little pack of 3 or 4 postcards or something to a monthly winner. I'm afraid I don't have merchandising. We don't I don't earn enough money from this. This isn't a big podcast thing with major sponsors. If anybody knows any major sponsors who would like to get involved, then I'd be happy to pass on their merchandise for winners. But if you have any ideas, then please let me know. Either email me or put ideas into the Facebook group. What else am I going to... Oh, yes. So next week's going to be back to a feedback week. So next week, there's the option for, if you would like to get some proper feedback, some critique on a photo of yours, then again, either put it into the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres Facebook group, or email it to me, kim@kimayres.co.uk. Tell me what your sticking point is, tell me a bit about the photo, where you feel the problems are, and I will do my best to give you the critique, feedback, and help on how to improve your photo. I've got space for about 4, maybe maximum of 5, but probably around about 4, and I think Viji has already nabbed one of those. So if you would like feedback on your photos, get them sent in to me as early as possible. Then in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to be starting to look at the idea of still life, particularly kind of artistic still life that looks like it could have been done in the style of the old masters, or that painterly style of still life. Now, I did something about this a while back, but I then realised it's actually about 3 years ago since I last did that, and we've all come a long way with our photography since then, so I thought it was worth revisiting. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about still life, and I will have a slot for about maybe two or three images for feedback on that. And then what I will be doing is I will be setting a still life challenge. Okay, so in 3 weeks' time, we'll then be having a challenge like we have today, but for still life. So start having a think about that. If there's particular images or ideas you would like to know before we get to that challenge, we've got next week and the week after for you to send me your questions. But primarily next week, though, is going to be a feedback session. In fact, if you've even tried a still life and you want to get one of those in for a bit of feedback, you could always send that in for next week too. Right, last comments here. Congratulations and well done. There's various people sort of congratulating for the Smug Points and top threes and what have you. So last little reminder, if you find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, please consider supporting them by buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres. And invite your friends along for extra Smug Points. Enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your weekend, and the rest of your week. And I will try and update the Smug Points leaderboard by the end of the day, if not tomorrow. Thank you very much once again to everybody who sent in images, and I look forward to find the right bit of technical, and look forward to seeing you all next weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.